Okay. Welcome. My name's Michael Wilkinson. Now, I am going to talk to you about whether the startups of today are equipped to navigate the uncertainty tomorrow, which is a particularly relevant topic for our current climate. Now, I'm the founder and CEO of Xponential Spark. I was one of the first employees into Crowdcube about 7, 8 years ago, and built that business up with Darren and Luke, the two co-founders, over that period. And I'm also an investor and freelance commercial director into Propelia, which is a launch accelerator. And it's actually with Dan Simmons, the founder of Propelia, that this thesis and lots of what I'm talking about today, it comes to the fore. So over the last 8 years, between Dan and myself, we've engaged with hundreds of companies, ranging from Forward Partners to Mumbly to Monzo, Revolut, GoHenry, and actually this research has highlighted some of the key or informed our key thesis here, which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail in a second. But many of the startups that I've come across, I think are actually ill-equipped to thrive in the uncertainty of tomorrow. And if you look at the Startup Genome Project, and that research still indicates that 90% of startups are likely to fail. But why is this? It doesn't make any sense. Why would 90% of capital that go into startups be wasted? And with a business landscape that's changing fast, there's a really crucial time-sensitive need to build resilient businesses that can thrive in uncertainty. And I think this core capability, this navigating uncertainty, one that precedes planning and strategy, will become a prerequisite to survive, thrive, and win a market category, or build a new market category in the uncertainty of tomorrow. So there is, I believe, a formula for navigating uncertainty, and it's particularly relevant in uncertain times. So if you look at actually, I spend a lot of time speaking to entrepreneurs and founders about business strategy, resilience, growth, and I see a reasonably small collective, but a really relevant collective that see opportunity in crisis. They embrace this ambiguity. They are happy working in uncertainty and display the mindset, vision, orientation to act rather than observe. And unfortunately, I've also seen an increasing flooding of the market with weak ancillary ideas. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about ancillary ideas in a second, but also a thinning of talent at the startup end, as it becomes for many people a lifestyle choice. Now, what we're going to talk about here is applicable primarily in the first 12 months of business, but also relevant beyond that. And I think if you look at the growing movement of podcasts, research, petition, government initiatives that have come out in the last couple of weeks and months, the economy is going to be shaped and changed by COVID-19. And I think there's also a predisposition, a requirement for founders to act, engage, and work in a different manner to survive and thrive beyond it. So let me run you through the kind of thesis around and this formula for navigating uncertainty that I think is incredibly valuable for startups to maintain market position and grow into our uncertain future. So let's start with the human craving for certainty. Now, the human brain is hardwired to crave certainty, and above all else, this is really a kind of evolutionary characteristic to maximize our chance of survival. There's a really interesting comment from Jiddu Krishnamurti, who says, "Do you want to know what my secret is? I don't mind what happens." And this philosophy of leading to freedom and happiness through allowing uncertainty to reign, you can understand why that would be helpful in minimizing our challenges and issues in the human mind. But for the vast majority of the human race, we actually care about keeping our jobs, having enough money, our children being healthy, being able to pay the rent, going on holiday, making sure we can eat, and all these other kind of crucial aspects of our life. of our lives. We want to make sure that the things we want to happen actually do happen. And that's exactly where our hardwired requirement, I think, for certainty begins. We want to know what can happen next, so we can rest in the moment knowing everything will be okay. Unfortunately, the only real certainty is uncertainty, and the world has been thrown into disarray over the past few months. And the hard reality is that much of that has changed forever. Now, novelty drives uncertainty, and this is the first time, I believe, for a generation that the world has collectively been thrust forward from the path of, or the kind of safe path of certainty into where we are now. And you might not be too surprised to know that the vast majority of us would actually like to return to more certain pastures. And look, this is completely understandable. It's hard to argue a case for wanting your daily life to be fundamentally insecure. However, there's actually a really significant value in embracing and looking to tame chaos, for want of a better phrase. So moving into this set of characteristics, attributes, parameters, that this 8 years of research and working with hundreds of different entrepreneurs, some that failed, some that didn't, some that were incredibly successful, has highlighted these key sets of attributes. And the first one of these is a depth of thinking at this intersection between certainty and uncertainty. So I guess that the easiest way to start looking into that is let's look at what feeds our certainty on a human level and on a day-to-day basis. So things like our routine when we wake up, our home and surrounding neighborhoods that behave as usual, the technologies that support and connect us, the food that we have in the fridge, transport links and routes, monthly buying patterns, future arrangement, all the plans that we make. And this layer really helps us turn the uncertainties on a daily kind of face level basis into certainties. And right now we're seeing volumes of what we like to call digital utilities, remote delivery logistical tools and platforms that have been developed and nurtured over years, now surging in value. They're really coming to the fore, and they're maintaining our certainty in this face value layer. Think of guys like Amazon Prime, Zoom, Mindful Chef. But actually, there's a sub-layer below this that's more important, far deeper, and offers more meaningful insight into who a person is, how they're going to act, what they believe. So we're talking about things like, a personal belief in meta-narratives, and the thoughts and beliefs that give us meaning in our day-to-day life, our awareness of daily rituals and rites, our sharing of emotional responses, conception of natural patterns, the dopamine lifestyles that we live and drive us, our fear that concerns the decisions that we've made, and our role in and awareness of our role in supply chains. Now, exploring the understanding and I think the agency is probably a better word of this second layer, and then confronting the intersection between this and the base layer that I was talking about is vital to unlocking the emergent patterns that will help shape our years to come. And I also think it's really valuable in demystifying behavioral patterns, understanding complex markets, and why people do what they do. And that helps you navigate uncertainty more effectively. It helps you understand the unknown. And from what I've seen, the businesses of tomorrow will kind of engage in this level or this depth of thinking in and around their business and markets and customers in particular. So the second attribute that we found was vital to navigating uncertainty is these extraordinary founders, and not just extraordinary founders. And I'll talk to you about what makes an extraordinary founder, but also one on the right flight path. And we're talking really about someone with a particular a subset of characteristics that's on the right journey for them. So in the age of uncertainty, fake news, postmodernism, identifying and nurturing these extraordinary founders allows us to reimagine the rules in developing and creating these critical markets and actually achieving beyond what we perceive to we're capable of right now. And again, exploring that unknown. Now, our research has highlighted that there are two key factors that need to calibrate for this to be successful. So the first relates to the forward-looking capacity of that founder. And that's a journey centered around things like unwavering curiosity that embraces the unknown, a novel insight into their core market problem, and a real commitment to solving that problem. The sort of founder that will thrive in conditions of uncertainty and ambiguity and have an unfettered appetite for risk, but are also selective about when to embrace this. And I think lastly, and really importantly, that they have an ability to, and a proven ability to be able to bootstrap, make a lot out of very little. Now, the second element relates to the journey that got them to where they are. And this is more about understanding if this person is the right founder to be on this complicated and very difficult journey. And we're talking about background, skill set, experiences that led them there, really getting to the bottom of those. Looking at the insight and tenacity that they have that hopefully stemmed from their past journey, and really clarifying that it is a personal pain point or an emotional point or a practical resonance they have that goes far beyond the typical. Now, I talked a little bit about founders moving to this, or an increasing volume of founders engaging in startups as a lifestyle choice. Really a signal to others that they're going to embark on a type of business journey where the risk is viewed as crossing the start line in its novelty. And many of them haven't questioned whether they have the capacity to go on an entrepreneurial journey at all, whether they're also qualified to go on this particular journey, and if this is something that within their core they care about solving. Now, unknown knowns and unknown unknowns. Bit of a mouthful, I know, but this is a really interesting point. And this is from Donald Rumsfeld. And I think he got it spot on when he famously and cryptically kind of observed this matrix of unknowns and unknowns. And what we found is that a small portion of extraordinary founders and unique business explorations, they don't reside in that top line. The things that we're aware of and understand, and the things we're aware of but don't really understand. Although this is quite often the space where venture capital will tell every good business should focus, this top right column. And this is bred conformity and similarity, lack of ingenuity, and actually a capacity for startups to consistently chase kind of simple or more simple, obvious problems. And there is value in that, but there's not true value in that. Now, the space that we've become particularly interested in was that bottom line, the kind of liminal space between the things we understand but we're not aware of, and the things we're kind of neither aware of nor understand. And I think the reason that very few founders have been focusing on this is because there aren't really the tools, concepts, or language to explore the unknowns more deeply. It's really difficult. And I think we're hardwired as human beings to focus on the here and now, or at best the predictable tomorrow, amplifying that kind of existing shop window of the new technological focus, and really, I guess, zooming in on the incremental rather than the pivotal. Now, I think here's a really good example, and this is one of the founders that Dan worked with a number of years ago. But this concept of black sky thinking and diving into the unknown, trying to tame this chaos and moving away from existing frameworks and projections is scary, but it's vital to being able to work in that ambiguity and navigate the uncertainty that becomes and build that resilience to be able to overcome some of the challenges. But it takes a certain type of founder to be willing to engage in this approach. No one's going to give you permission to do it. You're not going to have your thinking ratified. Often as a founder, you're going to face incredulity from your peers. and often friends, and you may even fail. But actually, the potential of attacking problems and new markets in this way has the potential to be world changing. Now, there's an interesting piece of work that we've done on exploring disruption, and I think first and foremost, our startup nomenclature is awash with this term, and it's misappropriated on almost all occasions. I think lots of the time we're referring to kind of incremental change that's repackaged, and rather frustratingly, a lot of the time it's just a startup marketing tool. So you could define our current situation as proper disruption. It's an intervention into our kind of daily patterns and behaviors and activities, and the predictability for the moment is actually knowingly uncertain. Now, an interesting pattern emerged from the founders that we worked with, and I think it goes some way to understanding the interesting relationship that all of them have with disruption across these kind of 4 stages. So the first one was evaluating disruption. And I think, as a rule of thumb, most of us until recently have not really needed to examine disruption, kind of reflecting and evaluating the impact of cost of disruption on our daily lives. But it's completely vital. Facing disruption. So I'm talking about understanding how old patterns merge with novel circumstances to fundamentally kind of alter our current behaviors. For example, a plane isn't just delayed, but travel to that destination is no longer possible at all. So this is where disruption forces actual behavior to change, and it's a vital element for founders that are going to navigate uncertainty to be comfortable with. Now, assessing disruption. I guess I'm talking about analyzing the downside, but also the kind of sensed and emergent opportunities. In the cracks of kind of this behavior lies the opportunity to conceive the new. And this always involves cost. It always kind of involves a cost, but it also opens up significant opportunities. And that kind of takes us to this final stage that we found all of the extraordinary founders engaged in, and that's challenging disruption. So setting the terms, approaches and tools of how, as a founder, your business is going to meet this disruption, engage with it, how you allow it to modify your daily life and redirect this disruption to create completely new value propositions. And a large portion of this is actually, in understanding what you need to keep and what we need to maintain and preserve and protect, as well as understanding those emergent propositions. And we've started to call these founders constructive rather than disruptive founders, because they're using this disruption framework to create new narratives, frameworks, and models that move us towards something genuinely new. Now, I think there's this equation can be used to move from this disrupted present to these constructing of new horizons. And we're talking about not focusing on generating short, sharp shocks into the system and micro pivots, but swimming in the kind of systemic and more complex currents at the depth of what we spoke about earlier in terms of thinking. And in doing so, guiding businesses into this new horizon, the kind of what we call the almost now of possibility, and using this disrupted present to construct completely new horizons. Now, the last the last bit that I want to talk about, and the last attribute that we found that was present amongst this group of extraordinary founders, is kind of preempting future horizons, and in the practice of doing so, building resilient business models. And I think that there are some key reasons that this is important, and the diagram is an interesting one for understanding that. But founders were more likely to succeed when they focused on trying to identify a diverse raft of future problems, as well as opportunities, which allowed them to begin to uncover the unknowns across not just one horizon or one potential future, but multiple horizons of their business. And in doing so, they developed solutions to handling, resolving, benefiting from these particular horizons, but also to maximize the value of potential change as and when that downtime occurs, and minimizing that downtime. Now, I'm not going to run into too much detail about how this was done, but this is something I can explain to anyone in a lot more detail outside of this talk. But I think as a general principle, this practice forces you to immediately act to mitigate foreseeable problems, kind of speculate on some of the less obvious challenges, and test the resilience of a business. But I think more importantly, in your business and as a mindset, it begins to kind of create this psychological safety around discussing challenges and internal obstacles, and promoting this culture of open and I think really necessary discussions on failure rather than kind of hiding from them. Okay, so those were some of the key areas that startups and particularly new founders attributes that they'll need to show to navigate uncertainty. But investors, corporates, and the rest of us can also really help these extraordinary founders. And there are a few ways that I'll run through that you can all take away. Now, the first one is reclaiming the first 12 months. Now, I think we need to reclaim this kind of pre-seed space, the first 6 to 12 months of businesses, to allow founders to attack problems that others might see as kind of foolish if you properly evaluated the costs and risks, and also really complicated to communicate outside of the next 45 days what you're looking to do, but also deeply uncertain in its direction, intent, outcomes, and influence. We need to allow founders to do that without constantly trying to pin language and OKRs and this lexicon upon them, which takes me to my next slide. Now, the startup vocabulary has developed to a point of management consultancy, and you've got pitch deck founders and investors trying to push people to be credible, and also passing themselves off as credible if they can talk the lingo with authority, and prove that if they can speak like that and create a shiny pitch deck, that means they're investable in the space. This is absolute bullshit. This management consultancy speak, I think, takes away from the potential growth capacity of businesses, and also means that investors are asking the wrong questions. That you're trying to create a framework to pin on all types of businesses, and it doesn't work. Why would you waste time forcing people to kind of intelligently adopt this strange language? Just let them focus on their business and challenging their market problem. Don't superimpose this language onto a founder's journey way too early. I think you get people asking about, what's your NPS? What's your kind of potential ROI? Tell me what your OKRs are for the next 12 months. Like, you wouldn't ask a football manager to predict with exact capability where they're going to finish in the league in 5 years' time, would you? So let's not do this type of thing to startups. We need to reset this vocabulary and allow them to develop, not hinder them. Now, I also think that there's a rethink of the value equation and a recalibration of terms that's needed. Now, I know that not all startups are created equal. We all know this. And there's a really interesting quote from Daniel Ek, the founder of Spotify, that says, "The value of a company is the sum of the problems you solve." And that is right. But at this really early stage, the risks are incredibly significant, and the outcomes are uncertain. Founders need to be realistic, and investors need to be fair. The amount of time wasted by both parties on legal terms, valuation discussions, warranties, rights, it's just a complete waste of time. Let's just all agree a simple, happy medium that balances the risk levels and throw that saved time into solving the problem. Now, the last couple of pieces that I'm going to speak about are particularly focused on investors. And this is removing the kind of vulture capital and simplifying that engagement. So in the old days, entrepreneurs used to finance their own businesses. They beg, borrow, steal from family, friends, put up collateral, It was quite a personal thing, and this journey was a lot more difficult because of that. The prevalence of investment in this market, speaking as someone who's been in the investment market at an early stage for kind of 8-9 years, it is a blessing, but also a curse. And I think somewhere along this journey that there was a distortion, and things like damaging the health and well-being of founders became a hidden cost. And in some cases, these externalities are so damaging that you could almost see, you could almost kind of suggest that capital providers are feeding off founders for profit. So I think we have a critical dependency of these founders on these sources of capital, but it's an asymmetrical equation. Now, I'm talking about the unexpected kind of erosion. I'll move on to the next slide. The unexpected erosion of founders' mental health, and there's an unnaturally high volume of founders being pushed by investors beyond levels that they should be, and I don't think it's fair. There's a massive expectation on startups to fail. Why is that? It doesn't make any sense. Why should 9 out of 10 startups that receive funding fail? Let's do something differently. Let's think about investing in a different way. That shouldn't be the case. It's a huge waste of money. Now, there's also this kind of myth of the unbreakable founder who laughs at failure, but it isn't true. Yes, startups have to be resilient, but entrepreneurs also hit those low points. So we need to be mindful of those and be more supportive of those. And we also definitely need to move away from this hustle culture. As an investor, please don't push your founders to work 24/7. Like, people need to have work-life balance, and it's not okay to push founders to the edge of a brink to drive profits. It's not okay. So I think in summary, there are a lot of attributes, and there are a number outside of here that are particularly relevant for navigating uncertainty. I think I've tried to highlight some of the key attributes that we feel over the last kind of 8 years and moving into the next 2 years are going to help startups navigate uncertainty and also support investors in picking and investing in the right companies. Now, if you're interested in joining the Propelia launch program, you can drop me a line on michael@propelia.com. Equally, if you'd like to become an investor in the Copilot community and have first access to these founders, you're also welcome to drop me an email. If you're looking for coaching and support and more of a consultancy, Xponential Spark is a startup and early stage consultancy, and you're welcome to email me on that side as well. And without further ado, I think that's my time. So thank you very much. I don't know if there is time for any questions as such.